What's happening, my friend?
Hey, welcome back to the mainland.
Well, you're making it sound like I was away, but, you know, we did deliver to the loyal Couch Funeral fans new and original episodes for whatever unspecified length of time I may have been away.
That's right. That's right.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, but it's good to have you back. It's good to be back in the studio live. And, well, we're not live for anybody. But
well, you're alive, and I'm alive. So it is technically live.
It is. And it is the day after a holiday.
Yeah, happy 4th of July.
Yep, happy 4th of July. It was a good celebration. Felt patriotic. It was good I had 15 people in my house yesterday, so and it was legal for a change.
I was going to ask you, did it feel like a patriotic 4th of July to you? There's just so much bullshit in the news, and this country's so fucked up that can you even celebrate 4th of July? I saw some shit from the Democrats. It's like taking a shit on this America's birthday. I know we have problems, but I'm right out of the gates today.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Probably unlike you, I just, as of Friday, I just turned off from
I should have
everything,
done that.
right? And I was cognizant that we were going to talk this morning, so I did keep track of a few key issues that I care about, but I didn't watch much MSNBC or any of them for that matter, just because really it's just all getting to be a drone and it's the same stuff over and over.
There's other shit to watch, like condo collapses in Florida.
Well, that's been that all happened while you were on hiatus. So
I saw it though.
Yeah, they just blew up the building this morning.
I was trying not to watch that because I fell into some smut. You know how I get into smut on YouTube? Like I talk about the airplane crash videos.
Right.
Which, by the way, did you fucking see this? There was a cargo plane that crashed, landed in the ocean. They called it water landing, but it took off from Oahu. This is Friday morning at 1 o'clock in the morning. Takes off from Oahu en route to Maui. I forget the name, but it's a cargo plane you've probably seen a million times when you go into Maui.
Uh-huh.
And it takes off within a few minutes. It loses an engine. It tries to circle back to Honolulu, loses another engine, and ditches in the ocean.
So it tried to do a Jen Psaki?
Yes, it circled back, and it circled right into the ocean, which happens to Jen Psaki every time she tries to circle back.
Oh, my God. No, I didn't hear about it. You know, you get no Hawaii news here, unless Debbie is listening to Hawaii News Now on her iPad or something, which she does monitor that, but I don't.
I flew back Friday to L.A., and Megan saw the article, but she didn't tell me, luckily, because I would have freaked out, because that was the same day. But it was just two pilots, pilot and co-pilot, and they survived. Coast Guard, they called for the Mayday as soon as the engine went out. Wow. And I think they were both in the water for about an hour before they got picked up, but they got them back to the hospital, and they lived.
Wow, no, I didn't hear anything about that. I did hear something about a large plane crash with a fairly large loss of life, like 45 people in the Philippines.
It was like an Air Force plane, I think.
It was some American military plane or something, so I didn't get much of the details. So
yeah, I couldn't tell if there was American servicemen on it or if it was just, I think it was a Hercules C-130, which I'm not
really? I love those planes.
Yeah.
That's so sad. Wow.
Well, aren't they like
they're too big
100 years old?
They're too big to fly anyway. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, they're too large to be in the air.
But the other smut that I found was, and you know how it's like anything on social media, whatever you're watching or listening to, make recommendations so you can kind of see what I'm into.
Well, that's YouTube.
And speaking of Florida, I found this. I've never heard of this or seen this before, but there's a harbor, and I don't know if it's freshwater that meets the ocean. It's near Miami, and they call it Haulover Inlet.
Oh, no.
So any of our Florida people listening to this, called Haulover Inlet, and apparently the seas can get pretty rough. So it's this channel that's coming out from the harbor into the ocean, and the waves can get pretty high, and these boats go out and they try to make it, but it gets so bad that boats large and small, they go up the wave and they come down, and the bow will get hit by a wave and they'll take on water, and some of them sink. But I found this YouTube channel where, I mean, I just spent hours watching it, and there's this dude, he sits on the side, and he's got like a photo lens, and he's making commentary, and he's literally sitting there making commentary as these boats go in and out. Let's see who's going to win today, the harbor or these boats. And here's a bunch of jackholes who don't know what they're doing, and they got people sitting in the bow, and they're not wearing life jackets. And,
wow.
And sure enough, people just plow through there, and they think they're going to make it. Some go fast, some go slow.
Oh, these are pleasure boats.
Pleasure boats, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's hilarious. and of course I want to see the ones that sink or take on water, and then the instant panic that sets in, when these people, I mean, they're drinking beers, some of them are getting bounced around, they come off the boat. Others, the water comes in the front and they just try to put it in reverse and it's making the boat tilt the other way and they're going to sink. It's fucking hilarious. You gotta check it out. Haulover Inlet.
Florida. Florida or not Florida? If this was a live radio show, we could play that game where I give you the ridiculous details of some horrific event and then you have to decide if it's Florida or not Florida. And anymore these days, it's Florida or Texas? Which one is it?
Well, and maybe Florida was on my mind because of the building collapse,
right.
And maybe I had seen something, and that's why it pulled up the Haulover Inlet. But it is, I will say, I didn't see any videos where there was loss of life, unlike on the airplane crash videos or the cockpit voice recorders that I listen to.
Right.
There is that.
You hear them extinguished in real time.
Right, exactly.
We're going down, made it. So, yeah, Florida, has been in the news so much, not only because of the collapsed building, which is so, I mean, it's a 50-year-old building. It's concrete and steel. It's one of the first of its kind. And I keep hearing, how does something like this happen? Because it was built 50 years ago. It was one of the first buildings like this built. And there's a lot of them built in that time frame. And newsflash, water soaks into concrete.
Exactly.
Seawater soaks into concrete and rusts the steel inside there, and then they collapse.
Are the Democrats piling on and saying this is climate change, or is it just bad design? Have we heard that one yet, or no?
Well, it's just Florida.
Oh, so that's enough, right? That's fucking Florida.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, there's been, some conjecture. I mean, the fact that I have that little tidbit, hey, water seeps in the concrete and, makes it to the steel, and the steel disintegrates inside the concrete, and then the building, loses its stability. We also, that land that building is on has been sinking, so they knew that. They also knew this building had a lot of this, damage that was happening from these processes. And they just didn't do anything about it, which is that's typically Florida, typically Republican, hey, don't tread on me. Don't tell us what to do. Don't try to save anybody's life.
But even that is, there are reports, and there's a paper trail of building inspections and recommendations as recently as just a couple of years. Yeah. But isn't a lot of Florida too is built on swampland and marshland? So is it just, it wasn't, when you have to do soil tests to compact, to do structural loads.
Well,
and all
I think if you check, the name Florida is actually Indian for no one to live here.
But so many people are moving there. There's a lot of Indian names, by the way. One of the first times I ever really kind of drove around Florida, Tampa, Miami.
Yeah.
These are Indian names. And there's a highway, I think it's Highway 41. I could be wrong about that, but I think it is. And it's called Tamiami Trail.
Tamiami Trail.
And I asked somebody there one time, what's that mean in Indian? They go, nothing, stupid. It's Tampa to Miami. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
In California, here in our own swampy area that we otherwise love to call Marina Del Rey, there's a building there that I'm quite familiar with. I probably went in this building several hundred times. I used to work in that area, and I did drug deliveries there. I worked for a pharmacy.
Oh, well, yeah.
And I was delivering, making prescription deliveries into a place called the Marina City Club. So it's 4 semicircular buildings, and they make 2 round towers called the Marina City Club, and they're about the same age as the one in Florida. And this building has some severe damage. It too is sitting on the water, right, in Marina Del Rey. I don't know, that area, I don't know if it's comparable to the reclaimed swampland in Florida, but it's not overly stable. And so there reports after this building in Florida collapsed, there have been several reports, local news reports about what's happening in Marina City Club. And it is a place that's dear in my memory because that's where I met Carroll Shelby. He lived there, and I used to make deliveries there.
I think you told me that story.
Yeah, lots of celebrities used to live in that place. But, it's old now. I mean, that was a long time
How many
ago.
stories is that?
I'm going to say it's like 16 stories.
And the Florida one is maybe
12.
12, okay.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, when I worked in that area, that was, easy, almost, let's see, I'm 64, so that was easily, 40 years ago, right?
Almost 65.
Almost 65. Yeah, a lot of talk about that over the weekend.
Yeah,
too.
big milestone.
Yeah, big milestone. Well, I'm checking my Medicare requirements right now. I keep hearing about if you don't do what you're supposed to do at the right time regarding Medicare as you turn 65, you end up paying some lifetime penalty or some shit. So,
what is it with this country that we have to penalize people for their entire lives? At some point, can't you be off the fucking hook? You've heard me rant about property taxes. Biden's been out there championing for this global minimum tax. It's like, at some point, can we have something called the death tax in this country? Can't we just, at some point, take a breath and not pay tax?
And I guess the answer to that is I would be totally in favor of all that.
Thank
but
you.
Now that you bring up property tax, steering me towards something I did want to mention to you so much while you were unavailable. Not that you were unavailable, but I was trying to leave you alone so you could enjoy yourself. Property tax is actually, when you think about it, is an ongoing form of wealth tax for the middle class. So remember, we've had had some past discussions about wealth tax, whether that would be a good idea or not, since there are so many currently legal ways to hide your income or disguise it or not pay tax on it. And the fact is that the uber rich don't really. And while you were gone too, ProPublica came out and with they got some kind of dump from WikiLeaks or somebody of a ton of information on what very famous, very rich people have what they've paid in taxes over the last several years. And ProPublica selected, I don't know, 5 or 6, Warren Buffett and Bezos and some different people to release to show that they actually have gone many years. Most of them don't pay any tax whatsoever, not some cumulative tax that they just don't pay any. And it's too complicated for me to lay out exactly.
We tackle every
works.
subject. Nothing's too complicated.
Right. And we did tackle this a little bit, and you have a better understanding where. So when you have, it's not really income, right? They get paid in stock options and so unrealized income is not taxable, but yet their wealth grows and blah blah blah.
Which I'm okay with.
Yeah, right. And so then we talk about a wealth tax, which you're not all right with,
right?
So, but when you really stop to think about it, there already is a wealth tax for most middle class people. If you own property.
Let me interject. Why are you choosing to use the words wealth tax for the middle class? Why not just say there's a wealth tax if you own property?
Well, I guess because we were, it was assumed in our prior discussions that obviously the middle class doesn't have the kind of wealth that the top 1% does, or the uber rich, whatever you want to call them, and that a wealth tax would be the way to maybe get some more equitable tax revenue out of those people instead of letting them get off scot-free and not really pay any income tax, because they don't actually show income, because once you get to a certain point rich enough, you're out of the tax situation altogether as far as income tax. You rarely, if ever, show any income, right?
Yeah, but you still pay tax, and I think that's the big. I mean, this point kind of intrigues me, especially about property tax, because that's the one thing that I think the American dream has always been, or at least for the longest time, associated with owning a home. Maybe that dream is lost on people now, and with the price of housing and everything else, availability. But also the biggest difference, I think, between some of the progressive communists that exist in the Democratic Party, they don't believe in private property. They don't, and that's literally one of the main points of communism. They don't believe you have the right to own a business and be wealthy. They don't believe you have the right to own a home. And I think that's one of the most fundamental things that we have to protect in this country. And I would like to see people of all incomes at some point own their home outright and not have to pay a fucking tax.
I think that's so much of what you just said I could take exception with. And the fact that you seem to intimate that there's a large portion of Americans, especially those that would identify as Democrats, that, are basically communists, and that's simply just not the case. But as far as what you're saying about, I'd love to see, I mean, it would be much more equitable for the middle class to not have to pay the wealth tax that we call property tax. But when you think about it, home and the equity in your home, if you are a homeowner and the equity you have in that home is basically the only real substantial amount of wealth accumulation that the vast majority of any sector of Americans has. And yet we are completely happy with imposing, property taxes on that single wealth accumulator that the vast majority of people have, while letting the wealth, because it's not necessarily property, by letting the wealth that the uber rich accumulate go completely tax free.
Well, wait, that's not exactly true. So let's clarify. Everybody who owns property pays property tax regardless of income. But
for the vast majority of the uber rich, property is not their sole form of wealth accumulation, right? They have stocks.
I know what you mean.
Other things, right?
The singular path to some type of wealth
accumulation
is typically in your home. Right,
and we tax the crap out of it across the spectrum.
And that's not even the same in every state anyway, right? So you have federal income tax, you have state.
It's only bad and worse, right? It's only a lot and more.
There are, you can look this up. I mean, there are counties within states that have various property tax rates. And so California actually has a very low, for all of its bullshit taxes, has a very low property tax rate. What is it, like 1%, something like that?
Yeah, well, we have Prop 13 here too, which keeps it under control. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophe.
And that's been under fire recently. And I think places like Texas, the property tax rate is at least double what it is in California.
I mean, look, I don't want to give away too much of my personal financial information, but I own one home currently, and the yearly tax, even under Prop 13, does go up about 1.5% a year, so it's substantial. Now I've been in my home,
and I think Prop 13 caps it at 2, correct?
Right, and so I've been in my home 26 years, so it's gone up a fair amount since I moved in. But if you were to look at this, the amount of money that I pay in property tax compared to what Jeff Bezos pays on his accumulated wealth, there's no comparison. He pays absolutely nothing. Yeah, and I pay a huge percentage of my total wealth every year in property tax.
Yeah, so I understand what you mean. And when you look at an individual's total bucket of wealth, whether it's income or assets, and then the amount of money they pay in tax in that bucket versus somebody else, mathematically, we should all come to the same conclusion that the numbers aren't equal. But I think on the property tax thing,
they don't have to be equal; they need to be equitable, right?
Yeah, but here, let me again. There's so much detail here. I think you, as a hardworking American, at some point, you should not have to pay tax on the property that you've owned for, what'd you say, 26 years? And I don't know how you do it, right? Because some people pay cash for a home, some people finance it, 15 years, 30 years, whatever. I don't know how you figure it out. Maybe it's if you're not working, so you just have retirement, Social Security, whatever.
You don't know how to accomplish what you're saying.
Right. So I'll throw out my favorite word, solutionary. If we're going to talk about things that this country needs to do to improve, you got to be able to own your property outright without paying tax. It's just ridiculous. And so the other thing about ownership and wealth and taxation and tying it into the wealth tax on total assets and the tax increases that Biden is proposing. The other thing I don't like about that is in California, we have substantial equity in our homes and there's a lot of wealth there, but you get to decide when you want to capitalize on that wealth. So let's say you have, pick a number, $5 million worth of equity in your home. That's not really going to do you any good unless you sell it, or you take out a reverse mortgage, or a HELOC, or something. Right? You have to draw on the asset to get the money. But if you just are sitting on a $5 million piece of property, I am opposed to you being taxed on that because you have some asset, and I'm opposed to the capital gains rate being increased because you should decide when you want to dispose of that asset. Right? If you want to sell it now and downsize, or you want to sell it in 10 years from now, you should get to control that, not the government that says, oh, you're sitting on this mountain of unrealized gains. I don't agree with that. I'm trying to keep money in your pocket, my friend.
I understand that, that you're trying to make me think that you're looking out for me, when for some unexplained reason, what you're actually trying to justify is somehow you're looking out for the 1% and trying to justify, hey, look, not only should the top 1%, should the uber rich, should they not have to pay any tax commensurate with the amount of wealth accumulation that they realize on a year in, year out basis. But you too, little friend. Here, let me put it this way. I'm okay paying my property tax. I always have been. I've always paid it, and I'm pretty much planning on always paying it. I just want the other super rich to pay. I mean, look, I can only tell you, Travis, and I don't know, maybe you were on vacation, but what the article by ProPublica that was released recently that showed tax rates of a select group of the uber rich, and more will come. They're trying to be responsible with this, and
Did they rat anybody out?
Well, yeah. I mean, the top ones, right? I can't remember all their names, but Buffett and Bezos and.
Well, I haven't seen this article, but can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Are they counting? Did you say they're counting stock gains or stock asset prices in the?
What they released was information on recent past years where these uber rich people have paid little or no income tax whatsoever.
Like a percentage? Are they saying?
Well, since for some of them it was zero, none. Hey, in this year, in 2014, such and such paid no tax, no income tax whatsoever.
So did they not draw an income?
Yes, in many cases, right? And you have that runs the gamut from, the virtual signaling of a Bezos or something with, hey, listen, I don't draw any salary from Amazon. I took $1 from my salary last year. Right. But that's just bullshit, right? That's supposed to make them look good. And,
well, no, I don't think they hide why they do that. It's because, and we'll see what Biden can get accomplished. But if they draw, like Buffett, I think he draws $100,000 in salary. So it's not nothing, but it's not millionaire money, especially in today's age.
Compared to that.
And then that $100,000 is taxed at regular income rates, which the max rate is 37%, and then whatever state he's in, and then the rest of his billions that he draws every year is capital gains, and that's like 20%. So the reason they do it is the math. They get less tax on the higher amount.
Which is why Buffett can say things like, "Oh, I'm all in favor of higher tax rates because you only draw $100,000 a year. You don't give a shit if you paid 90% tax rate on that. You don't need even $1 of that, right? Your wealth is being generated automatically from your wealth,
what he owns,
your other wealth.
Well, it's
right?
from what he owns. It's from
Right.
the value of the assets that he owns.
Right. And so, I think that this is just the beginning of a way of looking at this that is probably going to eventually change the situation. I mean, I think if one thing you can be pretty sure of in America is eventually people are going to want things to be more equitable, right? And you can call it all kinds of names you want. You can call it communism or whatever you want, but it's just the basic American fairness. And if you are sitting around and basically doing nothing and your wealth is increasing 300% a year, and that is being measured in multiple billions and billions of dollars, the government, people are going to feel that you should be putting money, equitable amount of money back into the system for all the support for all of the things that are making you so goddamn rich. And because average working people, even people that earn like $500,000 a year, they're still paying exorbitant amounts of tax on that even if they're at 13%, right? That's so much more than Bezos or Buffett.
Well,
or
and
any of these guys
send me this
paying.
article. I'll have to look at it. But I suspect. Why do I have this feeling? I just suspect that they're probably counting, figures that I wouldn't count in income.
They're not saying anything is illegal. They're
No, I
not
know.
saying anything like that.
But I'm wondering, though. I'm just wondering: are they counting?
Well, it's wealth accumulation, and so you whether you call it income or you call it unrealized whatever stock gain. In the long run, it doesn't make any difference. If someone if their wealth is increasing at these super high rates like the uber rich, and they're untouchable with taxes, something needs to be changed.
Well,
so
they
that
shouldn't be untouchable.
Some part of that, some equitable part of that money is being paid back to the government in the form of taxes.
But let's just look at the math, though. I guess what I'm saying is, if you paint a picture, you and I, what do you think the value of our homes in Southern California have gone up in the last 10 years?
Well, I kind of know, but it's not. I mean,
20%, 30%?
In the last 10 years?
Yeah. Maybe more?
Well, 10 years, it's been.
Remember, that's
it's
kind
been
of
fairly stable.
The climb out of the recession.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that my house is worth much more now than it was 10 years ago or at the crash.
It's got to be.
Somewhat, but it's not. There was, prior to the crash, there was a huge exponential rise in the value of my property, right? From what I paid for it to what it was worth, say, in 2008. Between 2008 and now, it's certainly gone up, but not 70%.
No, not 70. But I mean, if you look
but it did from when I bought it, right before the crash. So
yeah, so it's up significantly from when you bought it. But I guess what I'm saying is this: you look at the overall tax that you pay with your income and whatever you claim on your tax returns, but your net wealth has gone up for no reason than just owning a piece of property in Southern California, because your home value has increased significantly.
But which is probably true, but the amount of money that I have paid to the government is significantly more than Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett.
I don't dispute
or
that.
Any of those
All
people.
I'm saying is that the percentage, if you just take a table 1 year through 10 year, your percentage has probably shrunk because your wealth has gone up just in your little picture. Mine too, because of the amount of wealth accumulation we've made on just equity in our homes. That's all I'm saying.
Right, which we pay tax on and they don't.
I get it, but you're missing my point.
What's the point?
The point is that when you tie total wealth into asset growth, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to paint that picture. I don't disagree that these guys, were trying to figure out ways to cheat paying taxes, or perhaps they paid lower rates. But
I don't
it
call
just
it cheating.
Okay, but
I mean, the way things are set up is wrong from the get-go. So, I mean, when somebody asserts that Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or Elon Musk or any one of these, and the ones that don't have such famous names, right? Anybody that asserts that they're doing something illegal, I have a problem with that, because I seriously doubt it.
Right, or they'd all be in jail.
They have too much to risk, right? I mean, they have too much to lose to be doing something, and too much wealth but they're not risking anything. They don't do anything. They don't have to do anything illegal. It's all set up in their favor for their benefit by lawmakers that are sucking their dicks, right? Because they want the donations and stuff from them. So, and it's all slanted against us, Travis. So, I mean, it's like you have Stockholm syndrome.
I don't think here's the way I ultimately look at it, and this is why I just get so angry about the conversation in America that we have to punish the rich, because I would much rather play a game where I can reach that level too. I don't want to play a game where we have to tear everybody down and we're all bottom feeders. I want to play a game where people can achieve that level of wealth or that level of ownership of whatever, unless it's DirecTV stock, but anything else where you can actually make money. And I would think everybody would want that, but it's just turned to a point where I guess the masses feel like the system is rigged against them and they'll never be able to attain that.
Everybody's been okay with people being able to through their own efforts and their own rewards, climb up and become rich and so forth. Everybody's okay with that. But what has happened in the last 10, 20 years is that the wealth gap that we talk about so often has increased so exponentially, ridiculously, and then when we find out that the 1% are putting virtually nothing back into the society in compared to what they're taking out of it, that makes people unhappy. So you're just seeing the natural reaction. We could fix these problems and make it much more equitable, and none of these people that we're talking about would ever feel it or know it or loses. They could pay so much more into the let's just call it into the tax system, for lack of a better word, to help to enable us to be able to support the programs and the things that we need to as a society, and stop generating so much of this feeling that you're talking about. You're seeing it, Travis. I'm not for a minute denying that what you're seeing or sensing isn't happening. It is, and it's because of the inequitable setup, right? And not saying that anybody's currently doing anything illegal.
Let me ask you another question.
Maybe immoral, but not illegal.
Was it, I guess the other overwhelming feeling that I get is that this is something new. And it's not really. I think this is just the evolution of technology. In other words, you said something like people would be okay if wealthy people made their riches by building something or their own hard work. I mean, let's give credit where credit's due. Jeff Bezos, I always say his name wrong. Is it Bezos or Bezos?
Yeah, I don't think he can buy his name and repronounce it any way he wants.
He did build something, right? He built this infrastructure that didn't exist before. And in the early days of Amazon, it was actually books, if you remember. And now you can buy everything from eggs and toilet paper. But the system was the same before Amazon, so call it before the late 90s. And so I guess what I'm saying is it just more apparent now that as technology has improved, and you can see these millionaires and billionaires who are self-made, but they're creating something with a click of a mouse versus, I don't know, the railroad barons. Pick another industry that's different.
Well, in the past, right, it was railroad barons or U.S. Steel or fossil fuel, the oil companies and so forth in the turn of the century. I mean, it's so I totally understand what you're saying. Is it something new? I think big tech is what's new. Okay. So big tech is the oil, energy, transportation companies equivalent here in the 21st century. And through the course of the pandemic, right, the amount of wealth accumulation by these companies and their owners, or their originators, or whatever you want to call them, founders, right, has just exploded beyond all imagination. And so, yeah, there is reaction to that. But I don't think anybody cares how successful somebody is until they start to see examples of how the vast majority of the middle class is being dismantled and disappearing under the weight of them reaping unlimited rewards, which are only being generated by the people in the middle class, right?
But what about the other arguments that, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, right, but the top, 10% of taxpayers pay 50% of the tax, or whatever that number is. I mean, isn't
the top 10%? Well, you don't have the number.
I don't have the number. I'm making it up. But isn't it the majority of?
Well, the middle class pays the majority of the tax. Period.
I don't think that's true. I think. Well, you say middle class. I'm thinking more in income. So what are
everybody from $70,000 a year to $500,000 a year is the middle class.
Right, but I don't think they're paying the majority of the tax.
Of course,
I don't think so.
Who is then?
I think it's the rich people. I think they're paying the majority of the tax.
Probably not, since they typically don't pay any income
I mean,
tax.
Listen, what good does it do for me to actually cite facts? I'll go look it up later. But I think in a state like California, anyway, it's some really high number that there's like a fewer. The bucket is smaller of the rich people paying the majority of the tax. I think that's true.
Know.
But is ultimately the argument this?
I'm sure you feel that's true.
Are you saying? Is it the argument that people are happy for a guy like Jeff Bezos if he makes, pick a number, $5 billion a year, and he's paying $2 billion in tax?
What do you think? I don't know the numbers for this either, right? It would make it easier for this conversation, but I don't know what his net worth is supposed to be. But isn't he one of the 2 or 3
I think so, yeah,
wealthiest people in the world? So here we know that CEO compensation went from 50 times that of the average worker to 350 times that of the average worker in a year.
But it could also rebalance in the next year. For example, like even the stock market, these guys, the analysts talk about COVID stocks, like Zoom, for example. Zoom stock skyrocketed through COVID because it was the work from home stock.
Yeah.
And then the question is, is that going to go down? Which I think it did when people returned to work and they weren't utilizing Zoom as much. That shit happens. We've talked a lot about DirecTV, how that stock has tanked, and those people, AT&T, fucked it up.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we, for the sake of me making this an even more meaningful discussion, let's take some time in a future episode, look at this ProPublica article, see what it means to you, and let's come back and talk about it.
Sure.
Now, I'll refocus. It's been a while. It's been a couple weeks since that came out. It's pretty interesting. In and of itself isn't world changing, but it is just a matter of, and it didn't tell us anything we didn't all know or suspect. It just actually put real numbers on it, right? They had a dump of millions and millions of pages of tax information on very wealthy people that they did not acquire illegally, but probably wouldn't have acquired if somebody hadn't have decided to release it to them. And of course, they're not telling us where it's coming from.
So are you,
but it's all verified.
As a tax-paying citizen, would you be happy if the extremely wealthy people paid more tax, even if it didn't trickle down to you? Because it probably wouldn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have to trickle down to me. For my purposes, it's a matter of, hey, these extremely successful companies and the people that run them should not be reaping, such large profits without paying a commensurate tax rate compared to what I pay. That's just
because
not right.
Even if they paid a commensurate tax rate, that still doesn't address the income.
What do you think my tax rate is? 34?
I don't know.
Probably, right?
But I guess the thing is,
that's what they should be paying. They should be paying 34%. Corporate taxes.
But even if they did,
corporate taxes are now down at 21 without any loopholes or bullshit. And then when all of that goes into, not that they're doing anything patently illegal, but with all of that stuff, it's not even 21%.
But it's all semantics, because we've talked about this too. If it, like, the corporate tax rate is for C corporations, if they have a pass-through corporation, they're paying a tax rate at whatever their adjusted rate is. And that maybe is still a very low number, I guess. But even the tax discussion is different than the income discussion, right? You could pay 70% tax, but the income gap between CEOs and workers would still remain if you're making 350 times the other guy.
That isn't as important to me as, and that's not the number for Jeff Bezos and the workers at Amazon, right? That's just corporate CEOs, and he's not even the CEO anymore, right? So
he's like the chairman or something.
I don't know, but I think it was yesterday that the new guy took over, right? I can't remember his name, but Bezos is he's not running it anymore, theoretically.
Yeah, we'll see.
He's moving on to Blue Origin.
Maybe that's a way for him to shield himself from bullshit. I don't know. I just think I totally get it. I see what's going on, no doubt about it. I mean, you're older than me. We've talked a lot about this. I don't know what period in
That's not fair either. See,
why? I can't change when I was born.
If you really want to change something that's not fair for your good buddy Mike, make me get older at a slower rate than everybody.
Let me work on that. I'd have to do it with technology, and I'm going to have some stock, and I'm probably going to get rich.
And if you do that, then you can have all the profits you want.
But I'm going to need to keep the profits to reinvest in the business, all to keep you young, my friend.
Yes.
What's the big cultural change in your youth? That maybe it's several things. That can you compare any of that to what's going on in this country today? Does it seem different? More
so unaware when I was young, right? Of any of this stuff, right? This is my awareness of socio-political situations, right? Such as so many of the things we talk about on this program is a late, arriving situation. I mean, really. Yeah,
but when you look back at where you were, maybe you weren't tuned into the everyday politics at the time, but clearly it was a time that was a pivotal point in this country when things were changing. Did you feel the same gravity that is going on today?
As I think back on a political nature, right? Certainly I didn't know anything about business numbers or anything like that, but politically, I can probably say that as I was, when I was 10 or 11, something like that, 8 to 11. I was aware of what was going on politically only at the highest level, presidential politics, and only from what my parents, and that would have been my dad, from things I heard him say. As I got to be more like 12 or 13, and I was just on the, cusp of the whole hippie thing, and, Woodstock and blah, blah, blah.
Did you ever have any altercations where you had to go to court with your long hair? Could you go to court with long hair?
Because of my long hair?
Well, I'm just saying, like, that was a thing, right? You were you called a hippie, or you were the long hairs, right? You couldn't.
I was called a hippie.
A hippie.
Yeah.
And the hippies were looked down upon, and you were probably judged like, oh, you're up to no good, and you're dealing drugs.
It's a wonderful thing at 13 to 15, how idealistically you look at things. At 12 to 15. Right, that's so hypocritical. That's so wrong. You shouldn't judge anything by what they look like. I mean, as you grow, as you get older, you come to realize that you can definitely look at the outward appearance of people and draw certain conclusions. Right. So, I mean, if you look at a black person and say, "Oh, that's a bad person because they're black," then you're just an idiot and a racist, and there's no hope for you. But if you look at somebody, regardless of the race, and their pants are, down under their ass.
Or they have long hair.
Got their underwear up and they're all tatted up and they obviously live in the street. You can make certain assumptions, and it's not really stereotyping, right? So, I mean, you learn how to temper your idealistic notions of things as time goes on. But politically, I mean, I think I've heard some discussions lately like, oh my God, remember when you thought George W. Bush was the devil? now after 4 years of Trump and all the associated years before and after now, you realize that, he wasn't the devil. That
because
the devil wasn't even come yet in the form of politics.
And that's kind of, maybe an interesting point, because Bush in particular, he was still presidential. He still was.
At the time,
he followed the rules, right, of the job.
Yes,
and
yes.
You just either agreed with him or you didn't.
Well, he wasn't. It wasn't his mission to abolish every norm that allows our society and our political system to function at even what was then a fairly modest amount of success, right? And you go back before that and you look at what we thought was evil about Ronald Reagan or either of the Bushes, and you look back and you go, wow, how naive were we that, what's evil is what Trump has done during his time in the political spotlight. His mission to do democracy, to engage in democracy destroying activities on a wholesale basis, to try to smash every norm that keeps things running, right?
So it's the proverbial pendulum, right? I mean, if Trump is the start of that, doesn't it, tell me if you agree with this, that, okay, Bush wasn't the devil if that didn't really happen until the Trump years, and he tried to basically squash everything, and now we've righted that wrong by removing him from office, and now we have Biden, but it seems like we're going even further back than Trump and saying, hey, it's not just the damage Trump did in the last 4 years. We got to go even further because we're so fucked up, and this problem existed, and it just feels like change is upon us that's deeper than the last several years. And I mean, there's so many. That's the whole point of this podcast, is we talk about life and culture and society and all the changes, but it seems like we're on the cusp of some major changes.
I mean, wow. That's I mean, I agree 100% with what you just said. I think for me and my, I was going to say in my humble opinion, but there's nothing humble about my opinion. I mean, for me on the political front, the big pendulum swing started with the Tea Party in the Republican Party, and I think the real pendulum swing was all the way to one side with Nixon. And after Nixon was ousted from office and you saw Republican senators step up and have some courage and, admit to what was wrong and try to work with Democrats for the good of democracy to make changes. And we made a lot of significant good changes in the way government operated after Watergate, and then had some, all that time intervening until Newt Gingrich kind of said, hey, you know what? We've eaten enough shit. We're done taking our lumps for Watergate. We're the new Republicans. We're the Tea Party, blah, blah, blah. And then that started a regressive move on the part of the Republicans. And I think that has degenerated into the Trump situation. I think on the other side of that, there was all that going on the Republicans. And while that was going on, it's not like the Democrats were completely, devoid of responsibility for that happening. They spent too much time on leaning on their laurels about how they weren't Watergate, right? And how evil that was, and blah blah blah, and let the gap develop between the two parties to the point where it devolved into what happened when what should have been one of the bellwethers or the most bright spots in our political history, and we were with this country that had engaged in slavery, elected a black person to be president.
Yeah, that was supposed to be the shining moment of
it never meant to me that all racism was gone or anything like that, but it should have been more than it turned out to be. And unfortunately, the Republicans, for the entire 8 years, decided to just devolve into an obstructionist faction and just let their worst tendencies come through, right? And then I think that the Democrats just got up higher and higher on their moral high horse, and that epitomized itself in the creation of Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate, which was just a huge mistake. Sorry to all you Hillary Clinton fans out there. I don't think any of you are listening to us, but if you are, my apologies to you, but she was the epitome of what every single person that voted for Trump the first time or the second time thought was wrong with America and the Democrats. And so those are just all unfortunate things. And I think now, look, Biden is not any of those things. He's not Hillary Clinton. He's not Trump. He's a good person. He is trying to be a president in the best sense of the word, what that's always meant. I think his massive amount of experience in the federal government, not the least of which was 8 years being the vice president during the Obama administration, where he could see firsthand the racism that still exists in this country. And I think he learned a lot from it. And is he going to solve all the problems? And does he have within his own party at least a very boisterous far left wing of the party? He does. And part of that, the existence of, and let me get her initials right.
Don't even say
OAC.
Oh my God, I can't even stand her.
Elizabeth Warren,
nitwit.
Ilhan. These people are the results of the pendulum that swung so far the other way, and they're going to be around for a little bit. But in the interim, the heart of the situation now is a much more centrist government, an administration looking desperately for some kind of what's the word when the two sides work together?
Cohesion?
No, the two parties. Trying to get he's desperately. I think one of Biden's hope was that his long time experience and his amount of time knowing so many of these people could really help bring back more of a nonpartisan, that's the word I'm looking for, situation. And I think that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
I think those days are gone. And what I see is
they could come back.
Well, that remains to be seen, and that's kind of where I was going with this. Is the change is inevitable. Change is good. I like change, I guess. But it seems like the speed at which things are changing, on one hand, is good. obviously any of the social issues, you know me as a libertarian. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't even think Obama was openly for gay marriage when he was elected president.
No.
So think about that. When we think about how progressive and in tune with society a guy like Obama was, and kind of where he ultimately ranks in the terms of past presidents, think about that huge change in just the last. And again, maybe it was only in the last 8 or 10 years.
My guess is, and you've read more of the latest Obama book than I have. I still haven't got back to reading it. But my impression of that situation, Obama and gay marriage, was that he was probably never against it. He probably never really cared one way or the other about homosexuality.
That's why I said openly, because he probably couldn't.
And I think he struggled with, all right, I'm the president, or I'm going to be the president of the United States. How much does religious piety play into that? How much of my constituency are highly religious and are not yet in favor of gay marriage, are still struggling with that from the past? And I think he openly, voiced his struggle with that back in those days. And then I think we watched him publicly come to the conclusion that, hey, this is an issue whose time has come, and I'm making a mistake by not.
Yeah, and I think had he made those comments before he was elected, he might not have gotten elected. I don't know if that was the one thing. And I think he played it right. Strategically, he had much more to do and more to offer by keeping that one token close to him. I don't think he's faulted for that.
He wasn't the leader of the LBGT movement, right? Which there was no such thing back then. But gay marriage, and we saw it in California. It was legal, then the Mormons coalesced and put their money behind a move to make it illegal. That was Prop 8 here in California. And then finally the turning tide of public opinion on that washed back over California, and it was made legal. And
which was surprising. A place like California even took that position.
Well, I mean, nothing against all of our Mormon listeners. Oh, wait, there are none. That religious organization is always been highly racist. Sorry, don't know what to tell you. It was their money that drove the.
What does that have to do with gay marriage? Race?
Well, for them, racism, homophobia, it's all the same thing, right? For them.
Okay, I'll give you that, but not exactly.
Well, so you just have to look back and see that initiative, where the money came from.
But okay, so let's kind of, what I was teeing up here is the rate of change, though, on those types of things, the social issues, I think
is fast,
and it can't be fast enough, right? I mean, there's things that are long overdue, but politically, I don't know if we're going to get back to the days where we have bipartisan politics where people will come together and get shit done.
Well, obviously, you don't think we're going to get back. You want to split the country in half.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I guess. I just see that that was kind of one of the concerns I had at the rate of change going so quickly that I just wonder if we maybe need to slow some of the things down a little bit, because it doesn't give people time to think and to digest, and they might make rash decisions that will lead to violence and to war because they just are, I guess, forced to cooperate when they're not ready to. I mean,
so like what, Travis? Like what rash decisions on what specific issues come to your mind when you say that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haphazardly throw out things like I've done since the genesis of this podcast. Like 50% of the country is divided, and what I really mean is that I don't think there's consensus on really any of the hot button topics, like gun control. We talk about that all the time, right? There's some changes within gun control happening on the state level and even on the county level. Did you see this? I think it's San Jose here in California is proposing a new gun control law where the gun owners in that, I want to say, county would be required to obtain an additional insurance policy to own the firearm and also pay some type of tax or registration or something. And so if a county within a state can do that, then, and I'm sure it'll be challenged, but in the meantime, the damage will be done. Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure I read over the weekend, has another gun control measure where, what was their stupid fucking thing? they want ammunition sales in the state to have a serial number on each bullet, like laser engraved on each bullet. No one's going to do that, and then have to have some database. So I guess what I'm saying is, there's just, I don't know. Do we have a moral compass that steers us, and that we have some things that we can say, hey, we disagree on this, and this, but on these things we're united.
Well, are you familiar with the saying, and I'm not going to get it right because it just, only the essence of the saying popped into my head, not the actual quote, but the bend of history leans toward what's right in the long term. I mean,
well, how long? You kind of butchered that.
you know what I'm talking about, though, right?
I guess.
You know the saying I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's some kind of really nice quote that talks about this. I think that, and so gun control for me is almost a little atypical. I don't see a good outcome for gun control in this country one way or the other, and it's not even an issue that I really care about. So I think it's going to do what it's going to do. I mean, it's kind of like trying to outlaw the car culture in this country, right? There are some things
they're trying to do that too.
That are so, you're right. There are so things that are so endemic now that it's hard to imagine. But I'm thinking more of bigger, social issues, like racism, like entitlements, like equity gap, the wealth gap equity, and things like that. What are the right ways to? I mean, I think I agree with you, Travis, that when you talk about the wealth inequity that we started talking about this morning, there are no good, clean answers, right? And I think that it's something we still need to keep thinking about, and it is complicated, and that's why there is no saying like tax the rich, right? It's going to fix everything. So I just like to push things toward people thinking about it, not because I want any part of somebody else's wealth necessarily. I got mine, so to speak, let's say. I worry about what the continued existence with in the continued lack of care that the vast majority of the population is going to perceive regarding that issue. So to put that into English, if so many people in this country feel that it's unfair and nobody seems to be working to make it better, I think in the long run that breeds the kind of frustration that does end up in violent, civil unrest or whatever. And so and
those changes that are pulled through, not through violence, but through people coming together and demanding change, that I'm all for that, and that's the way it should be.
And I think that's going to happen with time, right? And I think what you're seeing is kind of like how fast things can happen now. I mean,
that's right. That's what I'm saying is because the Democrats succeeded in removing Trump, it's almost as if they are trying to outdo themselves and say, how quickly can we fuck everything else up?
Well, sure, it seems that way to you, and I can understand that statement. I don't know that that's really the case. I mean, you have this vocal far left fringe of the Democratic Party, right, led up by our favorites that we've already talked about. And, like you've mentioned too on this podcast before, where something I said about, hey, they're not the middle of the party, they're not running the show, made you feel better in the long run. I still think that's
temporarily
true. Yeah. Well, but their views are going to be incorporated into the mix as things move on.
It's like anything. Am I at that age now where I'm the guy, you and your fucking music and your long hair? Am I that guy now? I just don't want the change because
get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
I came out and there were 4 of my neighbors with 2 of their giant dogs out on the edge of my lawn shooting a breeze while their dogs were pissing and shitting all over my lawn. And I had to stop myself on the way down here from going, hey, get the fuck off my lawn with your animals and your youth. Get out of here.
That's what you really meant to say.
You're young enough to walk your dogs. Get the fuck out of here.
Right.
So, no, I think that we're both being affected by that. I mean, the gay marriage thing is an interesting deal that, watch outside, not involved in the issue particularly one way or the other, but watched it evolve with great interest. Legalization of marijuana or liberalization of views on drug use in general, watching that change and watch the numbers, right? Watch the numbers flip in a decade from 25% in favor of gay marriage and 75% against, watching that flip to the exact opposite numbers in 10 years. Right.
And that's the kind of stuff that I don't think can happen soon enough. And I totally agree. And the marijuana thing. What was this Olympian? We got the Olympics coming up. This Olympian that was what is she? There's a couple of Olympian stories. So it's track and field, right?
American, yeah.
And then she is not going to be able to compete because she tested positive for marijuana, and now they're saying that has something to do with race. I don't understand that at all.
Well, here's the good news about that. She immediately said, hey, guess what? You know what? I did use some marijuana, and I shouldn't have, because that's against the rules of the Olympic competition that I'm voluntarily participating in. So I'm out, and that's unfortunate. Is it racist? I mean, I don't know. I didn't hear that, but I can only surmise that logic runs along the lines of because she's from an ethnic minority where drug use is more
That's exactly
prevalent,
the argument.
Right? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me, and she doesn't seem to agree with that.
I know, and
right?
the other unfortunate part is...
I used it, I made a mistake, see you in 2028.
And the other unfortunate part of that story is what you just said, her quote, that's not even printed anywhere. It's just and maybe it's the loudmouths amongst the Democrats, but they're the ones making it a race thing and posting shit all over Twitter.
2-day story, gone off the airways. I mean,
I guess it's going to come back because the Olympics haven't even started yet.
For the benefit of the listening audience here, I'm going to take us back in time just a little bit to the early origins of this podcast, where Travis and I would find ourselves with a little bit of time on our hands and able to just discuss whatever topics popped into our heads. And one of the earliest things that I remember Travis telling me about the way he looks at these type of issues is how much he was fed up with the news, the organizations, the mainstream media. And I don't think you were ever a Fox News person or anything one way or the other.
Correct.
It was sort of a moral equivalency thing. They all suck. They all suck in their own way on their own side of the political spectrum, and they're all useless. And I think I push back at that quite a bit because I just don't see it that way. But things change. I mean, now it's been quite a few years since we had those initial early discussions, right?
If only we had recorded them.
I know. We could take more time off. So I think back on that, and my personal feeling is you're a little more open to hearing news from more mainstream media than you were back then, although you're still not like in love with CNN or anything, right? Or MSNBC. But you don't rail so often at them. And I think you've come to see that there's not really a good moral equivalency between some of the far. I mean, the news media has devolved along with the political situation. So I'm going to give you a few names out here. You have all your traditional network television news organizations, ABC, CBS, and NBC. You have their split offs, MSNBC. You have CNN, which is actually owned by, I don't know, they're part of Discovery or something, right? So they're going to be sold pretty soon, right? CNN was the first 24-hour news channel. Ted Turner.
That's the name I was looking for.
Right. And
when they were actually news.
And they really had no agenda, right? And they're still not as agenda driven.
What did our buddy Robert call it? Constantly negative news?
Constantly negative news, yeah. And they were very pointedly targeted by the Trump administration, even when, in my opinion,
that's probably why you push back, because if the argument on the Trump side is all the news that's not positive about him is fake news and you can't trust the media, I think that created a divide where people were like, well, wait a minute, there is still some legitimate reporting going on.
Right.
But a lot of that stuff, I think what I push back against the most is the sound bites and the headlines, as I always say, because you have the anchors on all these channels that, of course, are there with their opinion and the opinion of the network, and that's what they're trying to sell you. There is an attempt to actually have straight news. What's the guy, Shepard Smith, I think his name is? Is he CNBC?
Yeah, but you know what?
He's got a show now with exactly the premise that I always talk about.
But he's
and it's kind of terrible.
He's terrible.
Yeah, I know.
I was totally down with that. Travis Shepard Smith. I'm like, all right, this guy came out of Fox News because it was too opinionated and he didn't think, he was being pushed to slant news in a way he didn't agree with. So he comes to CNBC, which is really
it's financial news.
Yeah, it's really the it's really the Samsung of newscasts, right?
What do you mean?
It's not Apple. Right? It's not OAS.
It's not supposed to be news. It's more financial news.
Right. But he's running a straight news show, right?
Yeah.
I watched him do a show the other day. It's been just enough time for me to forget the details. But wait, hold on for a second. Oh, I'm not going to remember. I watched him do a news story where he sort of debunked one of the current more left-leaning news stories, through lines about something, and said, hey, in his report was that, well, that's not really the case, then how they said it really isn't the case, and now here's the whole story. It was wrong. What he said was patently wrong.
Did he have the wrong evidence, or
he had the wrong facts, and so I was disappointed in that. That shot his credibility for me.
Are you sure that there was no room for interpretation in that? Well, I'll give you another example.
When you interpret something wrong, you're still wrong.
But let me give you the example to that. We've talked about our buddy Bill Maher, how he was basically bashing the Democrats, saying how wrong they got the whole COVID thing and how they need to own that. But if you're a Democrat, could you take his comments and say, no, Bill Maher, you got it wrong?
No, I mean, I know what you're talking about with Bill Maher in that situation, and I have a fairly decent understanding of his outlook on things, and I don't really take much issue with what he said. I'm not sure what it means. I mean, in that particular issue, I'm not 100% sure how important that point is one way or the other. So I don't have a big problem with how he's put it out, because I don't think it was impossible for anybody to have the right answers on COVID because nobody really knew. And so take it from the worst, Donald Trump and shoving some kind of special light up your ass to kill the COVID and drinking bleach, and take it all the way over to Dr. Fauci and how he said things at one point during the whole COVID thing that turned out to not be the case regarding masks later on. It's not relevant. It doesn't matter. This is not this whole thing, everything about COVID should not be a political situation, and nobody should be keeping score of what was said that was right or wrong. Things were said at times by people that they thought were right. I don't think that's the case with Trump and his ilk, because I think they knew everything they were saying was wrong.
But what about,
and they said it anyway for their own personal agendas, and we know that because he admitted that to Bob Woodward, and we have the sound bites of him saying that. But legitimate sources like Fauci and other people that may have commented about things, and other medical experts they're being trashed by the right wing media for saying things that turn out in the long run to not be 100%. A
specific example, and I don't want to turn this into COVID, but what was the one thing? It wasn't bleach; it was something else that Trump was saying early on. God, what the hell was it?
So many things. Regeneron.
Is it something? Chlorine, something, not, God, it's something. It's a long word. I don't know. Chlorinic, something. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, it's the quine, chloroquine.
Yes, chloroquine.
Yeah.
So didn't that, and I could be totally wrong, but didn't that particular thing turn out to actually be helpful?
No.
Didn't?
No, that's an anti-malaria treatment. And he tried to say that was going to be a good treatment, and they have another word for that. But what monoclonal something or other that he did get when he got COVID turns out to be good, but it's not the chloroquine thing. That never turned out to be good. That actually has side effects and causes heart conditions and things, and that never turned out to be good. And nobody really knows why he was touting that, except to draw the attention off the things that were going to make a difference, like but were bad for the economy or bad for business, mask wearing and all of this stuff.
And even that. So talking about the credibility of the source, I saw through all that at the time. I mean, when Trump was saying we're going to be open by Easter, to me that was purely motivated by the economy. I personally was okay with that because I thought we shouldn't be doing any of this
You
at
think
all.
we should be closed anyway.
I didn't think we should be closed anyway. But
Well-
I think I get it why. I think things, the divide is so much wider now because of the amount of pressure that Trump put on the media by calling everything fake news and
that was
it
not
can't be
helpful.
trusted. It wasn't helpful, right? So here we are now afterwards. I was thinking about this. Do you think we're consuming less media now that we've had, 6-7 months away from Trump?
I don't. I think that the average person watches the amount of news that they watch, and for the vast majority of people, it's minimal. So for you and me, Travis, and many people like us, we watch a lot more news, and we lose sight of it. We think everybody knows as much about these different issues as we do, and they frankly don't. And that's one of the problems. The only thing that comes out of 4 years of calling news fake news is that a bunch of people come away thinking news is fake. And that's just not the case. The vast majority of news that you see on television is not fake news. It's just the news. Now, getting back to the reason why I brought up this whole thing about how I originally remember you telling me how you hated CNN, and here's how I've come your way on this, right? Because at that time, I was a huge fan of MSNBC, right? And I would watch
Rachel Maddow.
and I still watch her and I still respect her, but I get the negative things about her that people come away with more than I did back then. But here's the thing about news. The problem we're having with news is that if you go back to the old days where there were just the broadcast, just really the
Walter
network
Cronkites.
Yeah, there were 3 news organizations,
Black and white TV.
Yeah, but they held themselves to a standard that no longer exists. And over the years, their standards were disintegrated by the pressure to be entertainment more than news. Mm-hmm. There was a time when network news was just news and ratings were not. News organizations at the networks were not judged on ratings. They never were. It was the quality of the news and it was the journalism. All right. So yes, that has degraded throughout the entire news delivery system. And that's because it's all advertiser based. So here's the conclusion I've come to in wondering how such a smart guy like you could be so disaffected by the news and come away from it with such a bad feeling about it. Well, for one thing, as you stated earlier, and I thank you for pointing this out to the listening audience often, I am quite a bit older than you. So I watched a lot of news, even when I wasn't a big political junkie, that was from that other time. And so for me, as I watch news broadcasts that remind me, have standards and production values equivalent to those that I remember from the broadcast news days of CBS especially, it doesn't seem that bad. But for you, when you started to really give a shit about news, that had already disintegrated quite a bit, right? So you really probably have no memories of when news was held to a different standard.
Yeah,
right?
I guess my biggest memories are when you look at any local news, of course, it's all, high-speed chases, which we have a lot of, or we had a lot of in Southern California.
It leads, it bleeds.
Yeah, forest fires, all that shit. But I always watch the big national news, right? So the evening news, right? Every station had their evening news, and whoever the anchor was, the Barbara Walters, whoever it was, you'd watch that. And I would watch it for those same reasons because it seemed heavier, right? It was the national news. It wasn't just the stuff that was happening locally. It was whatever was important for just the whole country. And I always thought that was kind of a good way to look at it.
Cronkite, era, right? Back then. But
the Dan Rathers.
Yeah, and you didn't see as much of that as I did, right?
No, that's true.
I'm older, right?
Right.
And so for you, I dismissed Dan Rather and whatever their issue with him was. But for you, the main thing about Dan Rather might be the kerfluffle he had on 60 Minutes, and that, you can't trust him either. And what's the other guy that's now on MSNBC?
Brian Williams.
It's like, okay, so he got carried away with some stupid story.
But even those guys, most of these big anchors, they're just reading the news. They're not actually the ones digging up the info for the story.
Right. But here's the real thing. the organizations behind these people, right? The advent of 24-hour news, which disintegrated into a more opinion-based type news.
Right. That's the change.
Right. And then MSNBC, which is blatantly opinion news, right? So is that wrong? Is that right? I mean, it's not wrong if you can watch it and understand what you're watching, but people get lost in their bubbles. And because all these outfits are competing in the advertiser-based medium.
You've
right?
never made more sense on any episode of the podcast. And what you just said, I think, is the most important thing. It's not wrong as long as you can understand it, but people are morons
right.
and they can't understand it.
Right, and that's what I've come to realize is that I was watching MSNBC. I just was flipping channels around and started to every once in a while land on Rachel Maddow. I mean, I had no interest in cable news one way or the other. I would listen to what she was saying. I thought it was interesting, but I totally got that it was her opinion. I totally got it was the left wing opinion. And I could, because I think I had such a long exposure to traditional news, I could make that distinction. I could equally make the distinction that Fox News was, and always will be shit. All right. And here's the thing. Fox News is now the best one of the ilk, right? Newsmax, Sinclair Broadcasting, OAN, these are dangerously slanted misinformation peddlers that are net negatives for democracy.
But don't forget,
need to be. Go ahead.
Don't forget the other big elephant in the room that's the big change is social media and news from social media, the Facebooks and the Twitters, because, again, in your era of news, as you just described, that shit didn't exist. So it's the amount of sources that people can get information from. They don't understand it when it's qualified, if you will, anchor giving you their opinion of the news. They're certainly not going to understand it when it comes through social media.
No, I think that you're 100% right. I mean, one of the big changes, and not necessarily positive for how news is delivered, is social media. Irresponsible deliverers of news, such as Facebook, right, that deliver an equal amount of misinformation along with regular
What can we
information.
do? Something you said in there intrigued me, that people aren't qualified or don't understand what it is they're reading or viewing. How can we impose more restrictions on people?
No.
And qualify them for the news? Because that's the other thing I remember. The turning point for me was it started with State of the Union addresses. And I don't remember what president it was, but I heard a critique of it before I actually saw the speech. This is many, many years ago. For me, that was the turning point. It's like reading the transcript and not necessarily just taking, the critique of whatever that was. And that's what started me digging deeper into, not just looking at the headlines of the sound bites. Okay, what actually went on here? What source did they quote? That's a whole other thing. You can say statistics show this, this, and this. Well, what is your source of that statistic, and can I look it up? And if it's not in the article, I think that's suspect. And if it is, click on it. And I do that all the time. I get lost in the weeds on Wikipedia, the little blue links, such
right.
and such happened there. Well, what the hell is this? Let me click on that. And I'm 6 pages deep. I'm like, I don't even know where I started. So I think, but even like the Shepard Smith example that we just talked about, he's trying to deliver the news. And, aside from that one mistake that you mentioned that caught your attention, it's kind of boring, right? If it's not, the main shit that you hear in the headlines.
Well, here's my solution. So you're not.
You don't like my qualifying people's ability to read the news solution?
No, I think no, but you always want to go to solutions.
I do.
Right?
Yes.
Here's what I think I've come to as the solution for this problem. It's not going to get better till the news sources are behind paywalls, where they're not subjected to advertiser and rating issues in the same way.
Like subscriber base?
Yeah. I mean, when CNN, which I think really wants to be a quality news delivery platform and less opinionated, unless it's Don Lemon saying, hey, here's my opinion. I think that when they get behind a paywall, they'll be a better news organization. And they're ripe for it. And I think MSNBC, same way, they're going to end up sooner or later behind a paywall. And then those news organizations will have different motivations, and it'll be based on delivering a certain quality to the people that are listening, which is not really the case right now. Now it's just straight advertiser competition.
But don't you think the same, and I don't disagree with that, everything is going...
That's what's wrong with Facebook, right?
Well, everything is going to subscription-based, and that's the whole other thing. We've talked about the way we get our entertainment, mostly TV and movie content. But let's say you now have a subscriber base, so you know your audience, I guess, but then aren't you still under the same type of pressure to deliver the product that they want, that they're paying you for? In other words, can you really deviate too far from the main narrative that your audience expects? You might want to deliver quality news, but again, it goes against the grain of what your audience is paying for. Do you think the same vulnerability still exists?
I think it'll be better. I think what we've seen is when information delivery it goes to a subscriber base rather than an advertiser base, it improves. And so I think you asked, isn't there a way? You were saying, is there a way we can control people and make them listen to the news better? Well, there kind of is. And that way is to say, hey, because I don't think it will eliminate the access to OAN or some. In fact, they'll be left there on the wide open Wild West thing while more sophisticated news sources on both sides. I mean, I won't be surprised if Fox ends up behind a paywall sooner or later either.
But there's risk there too, because at some point people get fed up with how much they're paying for subscription-based services, and they might say, well, fuck it, this guy over here, OAN or whatever, is free. I'm going to go read their stuff.
Well, Rogan's off. He's not on an advertiser-based podcast platform anymore. Right?
No, he's on Spotify.
Right. So they're paying him straight up. Right. So it's not. I don't listen to Joe Rogan, but that's my understanding that he has gone down this other road. It's not advertising based podcasting, right?
Yeah, but he's not news. I mean, he's more interview based, and he's
right. But he's not competing. It's not advertiser driven. Is advertising as the monetizing platform for information delivery is not a good situation.
Well, and I don't have a dog in the fight on this, but look at the impact that advertisers have had in recent years with this whole cancel culture phenomena that boils my blood. But you've had advertisers who have been influential in changing the course of the conversation by saying, "Hey, we're going to pull our ad from you if we think that you're controversial."
Virtue signaling from the advertisers that you're talking about. So my opinion about that is that it's never done shit. It's never accomplished anything.
It has, though. Think about like the Fox News guys that were ousted because of sexual harassment issues. I think some of that was pressure from advertisers that they were going to pull out. Think about it. Even Tucker Carlson, I'm pretty sure that he's got like either sections of the show where there's no ads, or he reruns ads, or there's just a black screen. I don't even know, because advertisers have pulled out.
Well, such a terrible example, Tucker Carlson. What is he? Is he the presumptive Trump follow-up, or is he what was the guy, Bill, the no spin zone?
Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
He was another one.
Isn't he the one? Isn't Tucker Carlson the one that replaced Bill O'Reilly? So.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson was already on the network, I think the hour before or 2 hours before.
So advertiser impact causes Bill O'Reilly to be taken off Fox News. They're one of their biggest money makers, right? And the advertisers
big money maker.
Yeah, on advertising. And the advertisers are like, hey, this guy's toxic. Get rid of him.
Right.
And so he goes to OAN, or he goes to Newsmax, right? Well, I don't know if he's still there. I don't want my name on any list that says I watch Newsmax, but
because you'll be an extremist.
But here's the thing: it didn't solve anything, right?
It did.
You brought Tucker Carlson in, and then you got to wait 4 years or something for his toxicity to build up and be recognized by advertisers. It'll just be better when there's a different way of monetizing.
Well,
this.
Think about it, though. I mean, from the advertiser's perspective, they want to sell something. They want to make money.
That's okay.
So if millions of people watch Fox News and you want to sell whatever, dog food, that's a good investment for you. And then if that 1 hour of Bill O'Reilly, and that's the other thing you have to understand about these news shows is the ratings are tied to typically those hour increments, right? You know, the hour of Bill O'Reilly might be totally different than the hour of Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson. So if you were selling your dog food and you need to get rid of the hour of Bill O'Reilly because he's so toxic, you might still run ads somewhere else and test the waters because you still have money to make.
Yeah, well, I mean, good points. I think that I think we'll see. I think this is going to be a slow process, but it's in the works as all of this kind of takes its place, you know. So let's take a minute here before we have to quit. I don't know how much longer you have today, but I sent you an article on the antitrust, which is tied into this.
Does that make us experts now? We always dangle the carrot that we're going to do some research and talk about antitrust, but are we qualified experts now?
Well, not really, but I did want to, because we've talked about it.
Before you get into this, and just basically to kind of skip to the end, essentially it's a win for Facebook, and I'll let you describe it. But did you see this thing over the weekend with Mark Zuckerberg? He was like skiing or something, like water skiing,
I'm gonna look for
holding an American flag, like rocking out to country music or something.
Talk about virtue signaling.
I mean, did he know the outcome of the?
Oh, I think so. I think that, so for the listening audience, you know, Travis and I have talked a couple of times, a couple of different episodes about antitrust, and neither one of us are experts. And I think, boil it down, I don't think Travis really believes in antitrust, and I think it has a place. And basically, antitrust is when government steps in to break up companies that are too large. And so I think I'm going to take this chance to summarize Travis's opinion about that. That seems anti-capitalist to him, and hey, the government's got no business doing that. There's a long history in the United States, and every actual government of every democracy in the world, of having antitrust laws and making sure that companies, you inevitably end up with monopolies one way or the other. And sometimes they're necessary because, you know, some types of things just need to be a monopoly because it won't work as a competitive situation. But then you have other types of businesses, and I think our best couple of examples are Amazon and Facebook, that have grown into monopolies slowly over time, and sometimes with government blessing, right? I mean,
that's another big argument why I'm opposed to it, because they had their chance.
Right. So, but remember that antitrust laws and opinions and enforcement, you know, kind of go with the flow and change over time depending on what administrations are in place and so on and so forth. Right now, we're at a point where our antitrust laws are out of date with the companies that they need to be regulating. So,
you see a theme here that all of the challenges that we face are based on the rapid acceleration of technology, whether it's wealth accumulation or...
I think it's the theme of the show, right?
Well, yeah.
I think much of this, Travis, not coincidentally, has been fueled by the rapid expanding big tech situation in the Western world and in the world in general. And then, like everything associated with COVID, whether it's good things or bad things, many things were accelerated by the whole situation. So inequities between races, delivery of healthcare, you know, all the things that people needed to turn to do during their time of hibernation or whatever, COVID, when they couldn't go out and do so many social things, that all lended itself to things like Zoom and Facebook and Amazon buying things. You couldn't go to the store, so so Amazon sales went through the roof. Okay, nothing wrong with any of that, but it has brought the focus back on antitrust. Things like for instance, Facebook allowing tons and tons and tons of misinformation, sometimes being manipulated by Russian-fueled robots on social media.
Is that still an antitrust? Does it fall into that umbrella?
You know, for Facebook, I think the biggest criticism, and I think one of the things that has fueled antitrust attention, a couple of things. One, they have been allowed to grow extremely large, and they wield a lot of power, and they're not wielding it responsibly. And so I think that's the opinion many people have. Other things specific to Facebook that were in the news this week is along the way, 2014 or something, Facebook acquired through acquisition a company called WhatsApp and another company called Instagram. And those were direct competitors for Facebook at the time they were acquired. And Facebook has completely just stunted them, right? They bought them and they own them, and so they bought their competition, which is a typical monopolistic abuse of power that will draw the ire of
I don't agree with that
antitrust.
at all, and I don't know what's in the article, but Instagram is a good example because I remember when Twitter first came out, that was a brand, and Facebook doesn't own Twitter, right? No. But that was a whole brand new medium that people were like, okay, what is this? How can I use this? And it seems to me like Instagram has surpassed Twitter for that reason. You know, it still exists, but more people are using Instagram, I think. It's more younger people. And it was, Instagram was basically what, just for pictures, but then people are posting stories and quotes, and it didn't have the character limit that Twitter did.
We'll never know. So Twitter is a separate company, right? Mm-hmm. Which was not acquired by Facebook. Twitter acquired a similar company called Vine, which they shut down, right? And that's the typical thing that these companies are doing. So in Facebook's situation, they didn't shut down WhatsApp and Facebook, but their
user bases. I disagree. Their user bases have only grown. WhatsApp in particular is used, I think, much more outside of the U.S. than it's used in the U.S. But they have a huge user base.
But they were on track to be the most innovative one of these companies, and that's all dead in the water. There hasn't been a single innovation at WhatsApp since they were acquired.
Perhaps that's true, and I'm not disputing that.
And same with Instagram.
But the biggest, I'm not an Instagram user, so you know better than me. But the biggest reason why it really just irks me is because the capitalist in me always believes there's no guarantee of success. And so when we say things like they have stripped it down or they haven't allowed any innovation, well, there's no guarantee that any of those improvements would elevate your success or, gain you new subscribers or whatever. And again, that's broadly speaking, that's just the capitalist in me. I remember an argument early to mid 2000s, the satellite radio companies, it's Sirius XM now, but there were two companies. It was Sirius and XM Radio.
Right.
And XM was the larger of the two, and then Howard Stern went to Sirius. And I mean, they had XM had millions of paying subscribers, and Sirius had a couple 100,000. It was very small numbers. And the argument was it was such a pivotal point in the industry and its evolution that one of them was going to go under, and that they decided that the best thing to do would be a merger, so that they could continue, making money, of course, and getting subscribers. But there was an argument they were making that one of those two companies wasn't going to survive, and it might have been an antitrust thing. I don't know I guess it was approved, but I kept thinking about that if one of them didn't survive, you would have one satellite radio company, which would then be by definition a monopoly. And is that okay? And I guess the answer is yes, of course it's okay, because one just failed on its own. It just didn't survive, and there's not another competitor to it. So we're left with one, and you either want satellite or you don't. And what's wrong with that, I guess, is my big question. So I look at that with all these other things. You could have organic growth. You could have organic failure. And if a company fails and it goes away, then what are you left with? So just broadly speaking, I know one of the things in the Facebook article was that there would be increased, I guess, pressure and scrutiny on acquisitions, right, on further purchases. Mm.
So the head of the FTC, I think, is Lena Khan, and she's a Biden administration appointee, and with that comes a renewed interest in pursuing antitrust situations, right? So she filed some lawsuits, they attempted to make some regulatory changes, and Facebook took them to court, and the judge said, hey, you're too late to roll back the acquisitions of WhatsApp and Instagram by Facebook. But they left the door open for that, saying, hey, come back with better information, better better written cases. Come back with better law. Is what the is what the court said.
Did they specify what was too late?
Well, the problem is,
was it a year? Is it 5 years?
Well, I mean, I think the acquisitions were done in 2014.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So, I mean, 6 years. I mean, here's the thing, and there was approval given for those acquisitions, right? The one that's in the pipeline now is Amazon trying to acquire MGM, and so Bezos has put out, and Facebook or Amazon has put out a thing saying that because Lena Khan has written in the past that she felt Amazon was behaving in a monopolistic abuse of power way, was abusing their monopolistic situation. She should be disqualified from running the It's just that's just another abuse of power, right? Hey, this company is now going to dictate to the Biden administration who they can appoint to the head of the FTC. We'll have to see. That fight is yet to be fought, and that hasn't been approved, and it's in the pipeline.
If that doesn't get approved, because it was $9 billion, right?
Right.
Can MGM sue somebody and say, "Hey, you fuckers"? Let's say it goes back and somebody buys it for $4 million. Can they say you cost me $5 billion and sue somebody?
I don't think
breach
so.
of contract.
I don't think so. I don't think you have much luck suing regulatory agencies.
You could try. So who sued who? Facebook sued.
For this situation this week? No, I think that Lena Khan and the FTC, tried to say, hey, you guys have to roll back these acquisitions. And I think Facebook filed lawsuits and got a superior court, I think, judge to rule in their favor. That's what. And
I would say that they got that right.
Well, here's what the judge said. Come make better laws and come back and see us. Right. They didn't preclude them from doing that.
That's the right thing to do.
The general opinion now is that the antitrust laws now are probably, so this is in line with the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is our kind of the theme of the show today, how fast things are moving.
Let's just make sure the listeners know, it's kind of a happenstance that we have a theme today. Usually we're all over the place.
It wasn't
a pre-planned thing.
People ask me all the time, so how do you guys figure out what you're going to talk about in this? And I go, look, I'll talk about anything, and Travis usually has some things he wants to throw out there. And sometimes it just happens, I hate to use the word, but organically, right? One thing leads to another. And the fact is that I've been interested in this antitrust for a while. And I think I've said repeatedly in the show that they were going to try to make Facebook roll back WhatsApp and Facebook or Instagram. I hate Facebook.
I do too. I don't use Facebook.
And I hate the fact that there is no other Instagram, right? Because there is no competition.
But doesn't that speak for allowing big tech to do what they did? You love one of the products that they have, and they didn't Facebook it. In other words,
they fucked it up like they fucked up Facebook.
You said you loved it.
Well, I love the idea of having a place where I can post photos in a social media situation. But I hate Facebook and everything they do and every policy they have.
And then you hate them because they own Instagram.
And they own Instagram.
But is Instagram, I'm asking because I don't use it. Do you like the platform? Is it user-friendly? Are you happy with it?
Relatively speaking, but there's no innovation. There's nothing new. Instagram is not doing anything new.
Well, we're not on Mars yet either, but we will be. Just give them time.
No, there's a reason why, right? And here's the thing: there should be other Instagram-like options out there, and there aren't simply because
I don't understand the logic.
Squashed them.
If Facebook owns them, don't they want them to succeed because then that's more money for
Facebook? They
Facebook?
don't want them to do. They don't allow them to do anything that would compete with Facebook.
Yeah, but you might call it competition, but if they own it, I don't understand.
And here's the thing, Facebook so irresponsible over the course of the last 6-8 years, and throughout the whole presidential race. And allowed so many things to happen, so much misinformation. They're in great deal, they bear a heavy responsibility for the nonsense we saw on January 6th.
And I'm in favor of the misinformation, but
yeah, well,
but go back to this thing. It would make more sense to me logically if Facebook was really worried about competition from things like Instagram or anything else. I could see them buying Instagram and shutting it down.
if they were.
But they didn't shut it down. It's only grown since they've owned it. I just don't understand the connection there. It seems to me like they're not considering it a real threat if they're allowing it to be open.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Look, I mean, when you do not agree or do not accept basic premises for things, I mean, there's no sense really hashing it out too much, because really my contention is that when companies become so large that they can use their monopolistic, either actual monopolistic or monopolistic type policies to kill the competition, that's not healthy. That's not good for business. That's not good
I'm with
for
you
the
there,
consumer.
but
that's not good for progress, and
I get
it's not
it.
good for democracy.
But that I understand, and I'm with you there, but I don't think that's what happened with Facebook and Instagram. Like, in other words, if they went to court...
If it isn't happening with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Amazon, then it's not happening at all. Then it doesn't exist. I mean, there's no way you can look at any of those organizations and not see that they're monopolies and that they are abusing their position as such.
Yeah, but if I'm Facebook, here's my defense in court, and it sounds like this is what they used. You go to court and you say, number one, you guys approve of this. Number two, we didn't shut down Instagram after we bought it. And number three, we've only grown its subscriber base, so we're actually investing in it and it's doing well. That would be my argument.
Well, I mean, currently they made those arguments, so that's
And
why
the
they're
MGM
saying.
thing.
That's why the judge is saying, "Hey, you need different laws if you want to come after." I mean,
Who is this judge? Let's give him a raise. I like this
you
guy.
can look him up easily. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the reason why I wanted to bring this up was to say that, hey, apparently the laws that actually are in place regarding antitrust appear to not be adequate to deal with the type of growth that we are seeing in big tech. So I think now my point is, hey, don't just keep bringing lawsuits you're going to lose. You've been told by the courts. Here's the thing. The political will is there now, and that ebbs and flows with different administrations. The political will is there. The regulators are in place. People have seen the problem, and now it's the law. The part is, it's not that we don't have laws. It's not that we don't have regulators that want to deal with this. The courts are going to be the problem, and a lot of people have said that prior to. I didn't particularly believe them, but now I've seen it for my own self last week in the judgment that came out of this court case. And they're saying, hey, your laws are not adequate to do what you're trying to do as a regulator. So you can keep making regulatory decisions. They're going to keep filing lawsuits, and you're going to keep losing.
It sounds to me like they got it right.
Make new laws.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm here to say in regards to our antitrust discussions is now it's time to make new laws. Because here's my contention. We're not benefiting from the unbridled growth of an Amazon or a Facebook or a Twitter. I mean, Twitter almost single-handedly responsible for the fucking horrible nightmare that was Donald Trump.
Are they, though? Are they?
Yeah,
I mean,
they are.
I know this is factually true, but if you go to a bar, I was just hearing this story. If you go to a bar and you drink alcohol and then you drive home and are, you get in a wreck or you get a DUI or something. Let's say you get in a wreck and you kill somebody. You can sue the bar, which I don't think should be allowed.
Okay.
They didn't force the alcohol down your throat. You made that decision.
Well, let's take that story and let's couch it a little bit differently. Let's come at it from
Let's couch funeral it.
Let's couch funeral it a little bit differently. Is it right for a bar to sell alcohol to someone who's obviously over intoxicated simply because they want to make the money that represents, and they should bear no responsibility for selling alcohol to someone who's drunk on the product and can't make a decent decision?
Well, listen.
So does that change? I mean, it's how you tell the story.
Yeah, but I think I disagree. I mean, listen, if you show up drunk and the bar doesn't know you're drunk and they sell you one drink and you've had 10, they don't know.
I don't think that's going to be a successful lawsuit. I mean,
I know it's not. And,
right.
And I don't agree with it.
No, I don't think that if somebody comes in drunk and they're hiding it or they're able to maintain and they buy one drink at this bar and then go out and get in an accident and then somebody comes back and sues the bar, I don't think the bar is going to be liable. They're going to say, look, we sold him one drink. That's all we know. But if the guy comes in sober and sits there and drinks until he's shit-faced, and he's had 15 shots, well, the bar's liable. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way it should be. The bar in this analogy is Facebook. And they just, look.
No, it's Twitter. You said it was Twitter.
Well, Twitter or Facebook, either way.
But here's the thing is.
You're killing yourself with your own.
No, I'm not. What I always said about a Twitter and Facebook, with a Trump in particular, is he was so out there with most of what he was saying. And number one, he was innovative in that sense that he was one of the first, I think he was the first president elected basically by using that platform, right? Like Obama was a Twitter guy, but it
was the official White
right.
House.
You didn't get a lot of content from him, but you know, Trump was notorious even before he was elected. He was tweeting hundreds of times a day.
You know what? Here's the thing though, right? He could have tweeted 10,000 times a day if what he put in his tweets was truth and not
But no,
lies.
that's where I disagree. I disagree fundamentally from a freedom of speech aspect, but here's the bigger reason why I disagree. I think why he was successful is because for one of the first times that I can think of, you had a president who was connecting directly with the voters, right? Through this button he could push and tweet out the message. You didn't have to wait for the evening news or read it in the paper. You instantly got whatever he was trying to say. Now, of course, a lot of it was bullshit and it was wrong, but that's where it goes back to me trying to qualify the reader's intelligence before they can vote. Because if you can't see or you can't fact check it, then that's your fault.
No, this goes back to the bar analogy, okay? Where, hey,
then that's just them censoring him.
If someone comes into your bar and they sit there for 10 hours or 20 hours straight and they don't get drunk and they don't go hurt somebody with it, then there's no liability. And the same with Twitter. If Trump had gone on Twitter and just said, hey, vote for me, I want to make the country better, and that was, that or all his statements were something equally, I mean, there's no untruth in that. There's no misinformation. But I don't have the numbers, but it's something like 20 billion times he lied on Twitter.
But isn't that good? Because then you can look at that and say, this guy's out of his mind. Yeah. How can you vote for a guy like this who's out of his mind? Not in the same out of your mind like a Biden where he's got cognitive decline, but an out of your mind like he has crazy ideas. And that's the point is I always felt like a guy that's off the rails that far, you want to be able to see it. Don't shelter him because then people might think maybe he's not as bad as I'm getting in my sound bites. But if you see it there in real time, number one, you can always silence it. You could turn it off. You can unfollow these guys. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to go to your phone. And those who do, they can look for themselves and say, what the fuck did he just say? So that's why I supported that idea.
Okay. Well, I can't agree with
but now he's gone, and that's fine. I don't expect you to agree. But I do think that, and again, when you talk about the platforms and their responsibilities, I don't know, that's the slippery slope, where we talk about things happening too quickly, but I think we have to be careful about, what things we change as a result. I mean, Amazon, for example, who would have thunk all these years ago that an online bookstore that they would be buying a movie studio for $9 billion. I mean, that's of course there's no law for that. Nobody ever thought that was going to happen.
Let's put it a little different way. They're buying a $2 billion movie studio for $9 billion. Who would have ever thought that anybody would engage in such a corrupt business practice? Right? So, certainly you can take any of these issues and you can rephrase them in ways that sound, and that certainly is the extreme way that I just phrased that. It certainly loses all the nuance of what's really going on there. But let me just remind everybody that MGM sell by Amazon is Jeff Bezos giving the finger to everybody and saying, look, we're big. We're too big. I mean, we're too big for you to buck us. And here's how we're going to prove it. We're going to do something that's so patently wrong, and we're too big for you. We have too much power. we control too much shit, you're not going to be able to stop
But isn't that not factually true? Isn't there an opportunity for the regulators to stop this before it happens?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see.
It has to be approved, right?
He'll file a lawsuit, and does he have so much power and money that he'll be able to plow down the regulatory agency?
We better get this judge who just voted the right way for this Facebook thing. Make better laws. Is that what he said?
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that, but that's what he said. So, I mean, my suggestion in that is, hey, instead of just pounding your head against the wall with a judicial system that apparently doesn't think the laws you have on the books are adequate to deal with the issues that we're facing with these big tech companies. I mean, certainly that has a chilling effect on the regulatory agency that's going to have to approve or not approve this MGM deal. I mean, certainly that has an effect on it, right? And certainly Jeff Bezos publicly stating that he thinks Lena Khan should be recused from anything to do with Amazon and the MGM deal. Certainly, that is Jeff Bezos flexing his out of control monopolistic.
Why can't he
muscles.
say it? If they do it, then what's the implication that he was behind that?
Well, here's the thing, right? If the regulated should not be able to disqualify the regulator simply because the regulated is doing something wrong, and the regulator knows it and has publicly stated that that's wrong. And now he's going to try to he's emboldened by this, right? And he's going to try to use this power, this monopolistic power that he's acquired to not only to fight let's say that under Lena Khan, the FTC says, no, we're not going to approve this deal. He's going to file lawsuits and use his unlimited financial resources to bury this regulatory agency in legal nonsense.
Well, our government has unlimited financial resources, as we've discussed.
They don't, and they don't.
They just print money.
Regulatory agencies don't print money. The FTC doesn't.
But without
money.
getting into, listen, I'm not. There's probably a lot of reasons why what you're saying
is
true, or should happen that way, but we have to be very careful. And without getting into specifics, can't you think about instances in your past or maybe even a recent time where the regulated need to put up a fight against the regulators, and just because they're the regulators and they say things and they have the power to do things, that you got to stand up and prove them where they're wrong? Well, I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, if you're talking about the real life, our real life.
Yeah, versus Amazon.
I think we can't. I think that it wouldn't be good for me to comment on that, and the reality of that is, Travis, that I mean, probably we're the villains.
You think?
In that scenario?
Not in every scenario. I mean, I'm thinking about your career. I mean, there's just in any example.
My career is almost completed and was extremely successful. Going forward, I think there's no guarantee whatsoever
on anything.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about, I don't know how specific to get.
Well, my point is this. My point is,
I think often the regulated are lying through their teeth about what their real intentions are. And
so you're giving the benefit of the doubt to the regulators.
Well, I think,
and maybe that's true in this scenario.
I think it's often the case, right?
But then, just all I'm saying is, you can understand that there is a point where the regulators have total control and they silence the opposition, and we can't have that either. And I'm not saying that's where we are, but you can see how these dictators and these totalitarian regimes around the world are formed when that's exactly what they do.
We left big tech to their own devices. As a society, as a country, as a government, as a consuming public, we have left big tech virtually unregulated.
But we loved it every step of the way.
Hey, when Google was growing, their questions were asked. Hey, Google, you're getting so powerful. Can we trust you? And they're like, yes, because we are good people, right? But and they probably are now.
But don't you think it's more innocent than that, in the sense that all along the way, what's the technology age? Is it a 20-year span? What do you want to call it?
I don't think there's a fucking innocent bone in Facebook's body, or Bezos, or Amazon. These are extremely self-interested companies with absolutely no feeling that they owe society any goddamn thing.
I understand, but the innocence is in the form of consumption. What I mean is, as the technology was developed as quickly as it has, we ate up all of it instantly, whatever the thing is. I mean, as soon as Facebook took over MySpace, or when Twitter came out, I want streaming. I remember when Netflix, you had actual DVDs.
Everybody loves the heroin dealer. Okay?
Right.
He's your best friend till he's not.
The point is, it's not as if these guys came in here and, stormed the Capitol and took us over by force. We willingly gave them our money to buy what they were selling.
How many times before the rise of big tech was the Capitol attacked like that?
Our Capitol?
Yeah.
What's the right answer? 0?
Well, I mean,
I don't think so. Didn't it burn at one point?
I don't think that's a correct question. I mean, obviously, you can't blame the rise of big tech in total, or the cause.
Sure,
and
the
effect.
Democrats will try.
You can't link cause and effect that, hey, it's never happened before, but it has happened, and we know that big tech had played a substantial role in it because they were irresponsible, and we damn well have a right to regulate them and control that.
Only because of that issue?
Well, I mean, because of that and many other issues, right? I mean, the amount of misinformation that Facebook flooded into the social media sphere on purpose, knowingly, with no sense of responsibility whatsoever, right? They don't care, because engagement is what makes money for them. So the more flagrant the misinformation, the more engaged people remain on Facebook, the longer they're on the platform, and the more advertising that is for Mark Fuckface.
So it's the leads it bleeds scenario with them.
It is.
Leads it leads, I mean.
It's the reason, right? I mean, listen, we are not their customers, right? We're not their customers. We're their product. Okay? People got to get this through their head. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, we are not the customers. We are the product. Okay? They are completely recklessly and irresponsibly putting whatever the fuck they think is going to keep people glued to their platforms as long as possible, and that is conflict. And that is dangerous for society.
But is there no personal responsibility to get off the damn platform?
There's personal responsibility, but whether people are engaging in their personal responsibility or not does not negate their responsibility. And the truth is that they don't give a shit. They have proven that we can't trust them. So, yeah, we got decisions to make, right? Either you get with it and start to regulate big tech and realize that you are their product. You and your information are their product. They don't have any patriotic responsibility, societal responsibility. They don't care. They don't care about you.
I totally agree with all that. I also don't think they have to care. I mean, so I don't understand the moral equivalency we're trying to get to, where we have to somehow make them care or silence them. I mean, I don't think we're going to get to that point.
Make them care or silence them. Travis. Maybe we should say that one. That's a great topic. Should we make them care or silence them? Where's the line? The point is that they are engaging in dangerous business practices that are damaging the democracy, and we have every right and damn well better get with it and start to try to control that. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know where you get this idea at all. I mean, I understand capitalism. I get your desire for freedom, death. I get all that, but
if you truly get it, aren't you? If you hear the words coming out of your mouth, doesn't some of that sound like anti-freedom?
Anti-freedom.
I mean, when you talk about more control that the government has, that's really what worries me.
You know what's going to be more control than the government has?
No, more control that the government has. When they have more control, that always worries me.
Well, listen, currently in this government, we still have, we can still vote, we can still exercise our representative government. I mean, as much as we might think, hey, it doesn't work perfectly every time, and some of it's broken, and bipartisan politics seem to be dead and stuff. That's all stuff we can work on, right? And we still do have elections, and when things get out of control, we still can affect change, and we did just recently. Mm-hmm. Trump was full blown ready to go for another 4 years until he stroked out on his next McDonald's or whatever. And that was, there was still a lot of people that supported him somewhere. I mean, his votes were somewhere in the range of 75 million, but thank God, it was more like 85 million for Biden, and fortunately located in the states that could trip the Electoral College and take him out of there. So we still control government, right? We do not control these monopolies and these very amoral companies.
But they're not government.
No, but here's the thing. So you're saying, hey, when you say that, it's that I think, because I do think it's a problem that Amazon has more power than government. That's a mistake. That's a mistake.
But I don't know. They? I mean, can we point to an example where they have more power than government?
Well, you're probably about to see it, right? I mean, here's what I'm telling you. This thing with the MGM, you think that studio is worth $9 billion? That is Jeff Bezos flexing his monopolistic muscle in the face of government. Going,
I agree with you on the premise. You're probably right.
Control me.
But think about that. Is there another example? I can't think of one. Maybe you're aware of one. But is there another example where we need to allow government to get involved in the price tag? Take aside for a minute, the fact that, okay, do they have a monopoly power? Are they going to not innovate in the service? Are they going to shut down a competitor? But what does the price have to? I mean, I don't know of an example where government gets involved in the price tag.
Well, first off, you still need to go back and understand how antitrust has worked in this country over our entire history.
I understand how it works. Right? I don't agree with it.
Well, I mean, you're saying, is there another example? Yeah, we've always had antitrust. It's always been here.
Yes, of course. But the price tag component, is that?
It's always that's always part of it.
I understand. But let me specifically, you say it's worth $2 billion, right? This MGM thing.
Okay.
If the deal on the table was $2 billion from Amazon, is that a no-brainer? Hey, you can buy it and everybody's happy?
Well, Amazon could have bought it for $2.5 billion.
And that's what I mean. So if it wasn't $9,
they bought it for $9.
So the question I'm asking is if it was 2.5, would it have gone completely under the radar? No issue of antitrust. Government wouldn't give a shit.
There wouldn't have been any antitrust.
But it's still, Amazon getting bigger and more dangerous and more powerful.
Well, that is not, in this particular case, that is not the primary interest. I mean, Amazon does function in the streaming entertainment world, right? They have Amazon Prime. The sole reason Amazon Prime exists is to sell toilet paper, right? So we're all okay with that. We've all accepted that. There's nothing morally wrong with that.
That's the government's fault. They all made us stay home and buy shit online.
That's kind of true. But the fact is that we are witnessing Amazon give the finger to the government. Right? And we all like that. Right? And he knows that. He knows that. He's like, hey, watch, I am gonna give the finger to
I like him even more.
Right. I'm gonna give the finger to the antitrust.
You got a dick logo and everything.
Right? And then and watch, nobody's gonna do anything about it. That's wrong. That is dangerous. And yes, I 100% stand by my feeling that private enterprise cannot wield more power than the government of the United States in the United States. That will be a basic mistake if we let that happen.
And I still maintain my position that we can't let the government get so powerful that they control every aspect of our lives.
Right.
So how do we get those two in the middle?
Well, it's a great place to stop on it, but those two statements are not exclusionary, right? So yes, you're right, but this in no way equates to that, or results in that.
Well, it's these little baby steps that get them there. The Biden government, the communist government, the crazy
slope.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, I mean, my experience with slopes is that, there are slopes on both sides of the hill. So
yeah, that's true.
I think you got to be careful, right? I mean, so many great quotes, when they came for these people, I didn't do anything. When they came for those people, I didn't do anything. And when they came for me, there was nobody left to do anything about it. So that's another butchery of a famous.
That's better when you say it.
Very important quote. But I mean, it's the thing. If we sit back because we're happy with our fidget spinners, Amazon and we're too stupid and compliant to see how these companies are wielding so much power that they will be beyond government regulation.
But they won't. And I know we're trying to wrap up, but here's the other thing that we need to just consider is there will be future innovation. There was a time before all this tech and Facebook and Amazon and Twitter, and their success is not guaranteed, and there will be a time when something else comes along.
It'll be Nazi Facebook.
That's what it's going to be under this government control that you're describing.
Well, I think that was another great. I don't know if so. You guys got to let us know. I mean, if you guys hate this discussion, send me a text or something, and we'll stop talking about it. I'm fascinated by it. So, left to my own devices without regulation, I'm going to talk about it because I think it's important. I think this is these are the little things that we see happening to our democracy that we need to be more aware of. We've been very unaware of things for a while. And I think that all of this ties together, right? The rise and fall of the Trump nonsense and all of this, none of it's disconnected, right? It's all
and
connected.
I think it's important to keep bringing it up, and it's more important to follow the evolution of it because, these cases like this will be the big examples of how precedent is set moving forward and, what the new law of the land will be. And again, speaking of change and the rapid pace at which things appear to be changing around us, there's going to be more shit like this, and it doesn't even exist now. Who knows what's going to come along and how quickly that's going to change our lives?
Right. Well, I think I agree with all that. So,
well, every time you say you agree with anything I say, that's time to end the podcast.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.